All right. Hello there, everybody out in Internet's land. This is Carey Hoffman and Nathan Rijksen broadcasting live from the Internet. We're going to talk to you guys about Komodo 10.1 today and also do a quick review of the features that we've added in Komodo X. So do a quick intro. Nathan, I'll let you do you.
Yep. So I'm Nathan Rijksen. I'm the lead developer for Komodo. I've been the lead developer for a little over a year now, but I've been working on Komodo for about 4 years. I'm very passionate about the user experience of Komodo, making it easy to use, making it, something you enjoy using. Yeah, Gary.
And I'm Carey Hoffman, the person that doesn't know how to pronounce Nathan's last name. I am a front and back end developer on the Komodo team, and I've been at Active State for almost 5 years now. Halloween this year will be my 5-year anniversary. I started on the QA team, moved into the dev team, and I've been doing development for about 1.5 years now. And it's just awesome to be working on a tool that I also use to, well, I use the tool to write the tool. So yeah, that's me. Oh, I forget. Am I green or are you blue?
You're green.
All right. So we've got a sale going on for the 10.1 release. It's a $50 license, $50 sale on the single license and a $250 5-pack deal. Just use those codes when you're buying your license, and you are set. We'll be mentioning it again later on if you forget. But yeah, if you're going to buy the license, don't forget to use these codes to get the deal.
Yeah, and I think all of these tidbits, like links and whatnot, we're going to be sending an email out afterwards, if I recall correctly.
Right, yes. And we're also doing a survey right now because we're right in the middle of planning for Komodo 11, and our users' feedback is key to that. We want to see what people think of Komodo 10, what they want, what they like, what they don't like. Let us know, and if you do make it through the survey, there is a chance that you can win $100 from Amazon. And also note, please ask questions throughout. They're not posted directly to us, but we do get them. If we can't answer them all, we'll be answering them at the end, but if we can't answer them all, as before, we'll be doing a blog post to answer all of the questions. So please ask any questions that you have, and they will get answered.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as we always do, we're going to do a few polls throughout this webinar. And the first one is, do you own Komodo or are you just looking? So basically, are you one of our current users or have you just heard about Komodo and you want to see what it's all about? Shouldn't take too long. Everybody plug in your answers, and it'll go away in 2, 1.
Oh, that's interesting. I was
Cool.
expecting more own than looking, but
That's close, yeah. That's awesome. Okay. Well, we can talk a little bit more about what's new coming up and also about the what we have done. So, Nathan, go ahead with the recap.
So, just to give you a quick recap, obviously this webinar is going to be about Komodo 10.1, but we do want to touch base on what we did on Komodo 10 as well. A quick recap of that is we implemented Chrome remote debugging, which lets you debug applications that are running in your Chrome browser. Normally what one would do is they would use Chrome to debug those applications, but you're still using your editor on another screen or in another window, and you would have to then Alt-Tab or switch to Chrome and then find your code again and then place your break. It's a little bit of a hassle that we've all just kind of gotten used to, but why do you have to do that? Why can't you just do it all from your IDE? That's kind of where we were coming from with that. So now you can you can write your code and debug your code all from your IDE. You don't have to use the Chrome developer tools for that. Another thing we added was gulp, grunt, and node package management integrations. This means that any task that you have registered with these systems, so for example, you might use gulp to build your project or to convert your SCSS files to CSS. These sort of tasks, Komodo sees that you have them registered and then allows you to quickly run them. Similarly, we've added Phonegap and Cordova integration, which, just like gulp, grunt, and node package management integration, kind of sees how you have it configured. So if you're using Cordova with Android and iOS, then it will show you build and emulation options for Android and iOS. If you don't have iOS, then it won't show you iOS because it's not relevant to you. We've added React, Ember, Angular, TypeScript, and EmxScript 6 support. EmxScript, as you probably know, is the latest version of JavaScript, or the latest one that's widely supported, that is. We've added Ruby debugging for version 2.1 and beyond. For those who don't know, we've always supported Ruby debugging, but as of version 2.0, the debugging library that we were depending on was no longer updated, so we couldn't use it anymore to debug newer versions. So with Komodo X, we've added support using a newer library that is actively supported. We've added a project-wide symbol browser. This lets you navigate to your symbols, so your function and class definitions of variables, what have you, and on a project-wide basis. So previously you could already navigate to your symbols, but it was only for the current file or the files that were open. You couldn't just do it project-wide. We've added a whole new interface. So if you've used Komodo in the past, you probably noticed that Komodo now looks significantly different. But I think once you start using it, while it looks different, it's still the same IDE. Like the blueprint of it is still the same. Most of the UI elements are still in the same place, albeit hopefully a little bit more well done. We've added a first start wizard. This is very useful for people coming to Komodo. So for the 40% of you that are looking to try Komodo, this will be very useful because it will allow you to configure Komodo right from the get-go to your own biases without having to, like start the IDE and then have to go to the preference screen, which is just a huge amount of preferences to go over for a first-time user. So what we kind of try to do with the first start wizard is we give you the most obvious preferences that you'll want to customize, and basically let you start using Komodo in the way that you would likely prefer to use it. We've added new default key bindings. The old key bindings were an accumulation of about over a decade of just accumulating key bindings, and by that time you really end up with a key binding scheme that doesn't really follow logic anymore, but just follows what key is still available. I think this is also one of the issues that we've had over this decade period, is anytime we would add a new command, there was a developer that added the command and was like, okay, now I have to set a key binding for this. And with this we kind of asked, like, why do you need to set a key binding for this command that maybe 10 people use, and even if they do intend to use it, they would first have to find it in order to figure out what the key binding is. So kind of the main idea with these new key bindings is we only set key bindings for things that make sense. If it doesn't make sense to have a key binding for it, or if the key binding that you set for something is not something that you would, if
you're not using it,
you would, sorry?
Like you use it very rarely, then it makes no sense to have a key binding.
Yeah, or if it's just not intuitive, like it might be something that the key binding is not intuitive, so you'd have to look it up. In those kinds of cases, we don't set a default key binding. Basically, the key binding set we give you is sensible, and it's meant as a bootstrap for your own key binding. So from there, you can set the more complex key bindings that you desire. We've added a new version control user experience. What this mainly entails is the way that you interact with your version control systems in Komodo has been kind of streamlined. whereas before the menu items could be a little bit varied all over and inconsistent. They are now made far more consistent. They are also now focused more on you doing version control from a project context rather than just, you know, on a per file basis. And we also added a new bottom panel widget that allows you to quickly access your file history and your commit dialog without having to actually explicitly open those. So we did have a webinar about Komodo 10 a little while ago, so if you're interested in learning more about what we did with Komodo 10, you can go to the URL on screen. We've also had a blog post about Komodo 10, the Komodo 10 webinar, where we answered all the questions. We did answer questions during the webinar, but we weren't able to cover all of them. Again, we're going to be sending out an email after this webinar with the links, so you'll be able to just click them from there rather than have to copy it off screen right now.
So another user poll for you. Do you care more about new features or improving existing features? This is an age-old question in software development, and we're interested to see what you guys think. There's usually quite a polarization on this one. So let's see what people say.
There was actually an interesting news article I read a short while ago where it said that existing users mostly prefer having their features improved, whereas potential users prefer getting new features. So it'll be interesting if we see the 60-40 again. A little bit more polarized towards improving. Interesting. That's very interesting.
Cool. All right.
Let's move on.
So in Komodo 10.1, we did a bunch of work, but the major features that we added that you'll see are as follows. The tutorial tool, which has been in development for a little while, and I got the privilege of working on a significant amount of it. The tutorial tool is exactly what it sounds like, but it's very interactive. It has built-in callback feature and call-out feature, which can indicate areas in the UI that you want the user to see or click. It's very easy. Actually, I won't go into too much detail because Nathan's going to go over this. But basically, it allows you to either follow through a tutorial. We've provided 3 in 10.1, so there's an intro and then a couple other ones that I don't recall what they're called. Or you can write your own. So if you're creating a lesson plan, you can do the lesson plan in Komodo and just show the students where they need to go. It's very cool and it's very intuitive how to write them. And yeah, so check them out. We've done some.
If you've ever used Code Academy, I think that's always a good way to convey the concept of the tutorial tool. If you've ever used Code Academy and gone through a tutorial in there, that's essentially what you'll have in Komodo. A way to teach you a language or to teach you a feature. Yeah. Except now you're doing it from within your IDE rather than a bare basic editor in your browser.
Yeah, you got all the tools that you need. You don't need to move to an IDE when you need to do something more complicated. We've also improved the publishing tool. The features that we've added are features that came from our community. They were community requests and they were great ideas. So we've added the ability to force, push, and pull directly from a file itself. You no longer need to go into the publishing UI. It also, and the UI itself has been modified in several ways. It allows you to customize which direction a sync process is going to happen on specific files. It doesn't guess for you what you want it to do. So check those out. It's made the publishing tool a lot more robust and easier to use. So yeah, I think you'll really like that if you use the publishing tool. We've also added mustache, angular, linting, and gulp babel. there are probably quite a few people out there that are excited about those. The global font settings. So this is because you were always able to set font settings in Komodo, whether it was the UI, like the Chrome of the editor, or just the editor itself where you're writing your text. But it was two different settings. Now you can set them in one place in your preferences under the appearance preferences. So that'll be a global. It'll be a global font set. So you know the sort of just no matter what you're looking at in Komodo, it'll be the font size you want.
Yeah, it's
another
from the color scheme essentially. So you know, where before you would have to edit the actual color scheme in order to change the font size, now you can just change it in your global preferences.
Yeah. Another one is the branch switching tool. It's a new widget that we've added to switch between branches on Git and Mercurial. This was actually, I don't know if it was written from a community member or if we rewrote it, but it was a tool that.
Yeah, the idea came from, I believe it was Babowski that created that add-on.
Yeah.
So the idea came from a community member, but it's written from the ground up. Yes.
Yeah, a very active community member. Babowski has been a huge help to the community. The commit dialog improvements. So anybody that's used 10 already has seen the new commit dialog, which allows it's just a little bit easier to see what you're going to commit, add things to your commit, and commit it. But it's easier to use now. So you can use your keyboard. Whatever. I'm not going to go into too much detail. As before, Nathan's going to go over it. But it makes it a lot easier to use. The find results can now be opened as a file, as a view in Komodo. So where you see a file, you can now have your find results open there. It makes it a lot easier to review. It gives you a lot more room to see what what Komodo found for you. And the color scheme editor. Anybody who has used Komodo 10 will have seen the new color scheme editor, which is very robust and was had a little bit of confusing variable names when you're coloring features in Komodo, but those have been made a little bit easier to understand. Actually, a lot easier to understand, as well as some other UX upgrades.
All right, some other small mentionables. These aren't as big of features, but I think for some of them they will be quite well received by some of our users. A big one here is the ability to exclude folders from code intel, which has been requested for a long time now. Essentially, what this is useful for is when you're using, for example, a Node.js project. If you've ever used Node.js, you know that the Node modules folder can get humongous. And if Komodo is going to scan this whole folder, then you're going to be sitting there for quite a while waiting for it to finish. Not only that, but anytime you're going to write code, this whole database of this folder being indexed, being accessed every time, so that can make Komodo slower. So basically, what this will allow you to do is exclude that folder as well as any other folder that you might want to exclude. We've also improved the stability of code intel. If you've ever experienced that auto-completions just randomly stopped working and you had to restart Komodo, that should be addressed now. We've added support for new Laravel blade directives. This was contributed to us by a community member. I don't want to say the wrong name because I feel like I already did it with Babowski on the other one. I'm not 100% sure that was Babowski. So just check our blog posts for the full credits there. We've improved multi-caret to make it less sensitive. Basically, what was happening is when you had, you wanted to select multiple words, it might not have selected all of the instances of that word depending on the context that it was used in. There was some sensitivity there. This is actually a feature. It's supposed to do that, but for new users, it's not very intuitive that it was doing that. So you can still use it the old way by setting a key binding for it, but by default, the new the behavior will be to just match all instances of a word regardless of their context. History back and forward was fixed. Basically, Komodo gives you an ability to go back and forward based on where you were in the code. So if I'm on line 10 and then we go to line 50 and then I go to another file on line 60, if I click back 3 times, I go back exactly through those lines that I just mentioned. There was a bug where this would just stop working after a while of using Komodo, which has now been fixed. So you can now reliably use this feature. There were various indentation fixes. We've gotten a lot of reports from users saying, indentation was not being detected properly. Just FYI, this is because we made a lot of changes to the system. Basically, the old implementation had a lot of issues that weren't necessarily immediately evident to some of you, but they created a lot of issues for us trying to, grow Komodo. So we had to make a lot of changes to that system, and because of that, there were a bunch of bugs that have now been fixed. And version control is now contextual to files again. So if you're past Komodo users from Komodo 8 or Komodo 9 or what have you, you know that with Komodo 10 we made version control contextual to the project. So when you open a commit dialog, it shows all files from the project rather than just a file you have open. This hasn't changed. The only thing that has kind of changed here is that you can now have multiple files open from different projects. So if I have a file open from project A and project B, if my places directory is pointed at project A and the file I have open is pointed at project B, then doing any sort of source code control will act on project B rather than project A, which is, that's how it was working in Komodo 10.0, where it would always just work on the project that you had open on places. All right, Carey?
All right, so we're going to do another poll. Everybody's being so participative. Never mind, let's not make up words. How much time do you spend customizing Komodo after the fresh install? So this is, it's an interesting thing because I know I personally don't spend a lot of time customizing. I just tend to do it like over time. Nathan was saying that I know Nathan likes to customize things a lot so that they're awesome. And so yeah, we want to know what our users do. So plug in your boats. And
the funny thing about that, which I told Carey the other day also, I used to spend like a day customizing. And Jesus, give me time to talk. Let me see the results. How much time? Oh, that's interesting. So, still a lot of you spend some time customizing Komodo. I wonder if that would have been interesting to see if the first start wizard made a big had a big effect on this.
Mm-hmm.
What I was saying though is I used to spend like
go ahead.
I used to spend like a day customizing Komodo. When I did a fresh install, because I just have a lot of biases and preferences, and now I spend less than 30 minutes. But I think a big part of that is just because I now work on Komodo and get to kind of express some of those biases sensibly, I might add. I mean, it's not that the defaults in Komodo are entirely based on me. I still have to spend time customizing it. But it's just basically more facilitated now that I'm the developer and I get to kind of express those biases.
It's interesting. I wonder if all the new people, or people that don't own Komodo, were the ones who don't customize Komodo.
Let's do the demo. And I see we're running a little bit short on time, so we're gonna try and do this. Not spend too much time on the demo. Just enough. So you kind of see what's new.
Was that 1 sec? Up. Okay, yeah, that's me. This is me. So the new interface. Boom, there it is. You can see it. If you've used any other version of Komodo, you'll see a drastic difference. We've moved to a default dark scheme, and we've toned down the amount of things in the screen unless they make sense, which I'll talk about a little bit more when I get to the gulp and grunt stuff. So yeah, the UI has been toned down to be simpler, but it still has all the major it still obviously has all the same features. We're not just throwing everything in your face. Having said that, you can always switch back to a classic mode, which is something we've added to try and allow users to get back to the most, as close as possible to a traditional look. You can see that Nathan's doing that right now in his preferences. So it's in the preferences, appearance, switch to the classic light scheme. The platform integration, turn all of those on, and then apply, and it'll
whatever you prefer.
yeah, and then that'll revert Komodo to a more classic theme, and you can see it happening right now. Does it all without having to restart, which is awesome, very quickly, and that's actually partly due to the mass amounts of refactoring that went into this new theme, or the new skinning process. The first start wizard. So the first start wizard opens when you first start Komodo, but it's when you do when it's a fresh install and you've never previously used it. So you can run it from help. Is it help that you went to there? Help and then run for start wizard. And as Nathan said before, this allows you to set all the biases that you might have in an editor that you need. So set the theme, the indenting, and actually there's some of the integration things here. And then also, so you can see the key bindings that we've added as well. So there's basically a set for all the major editors out there, as well as there's a legacy. So if you liked and are used to the old key binding set, then it's still there. We haven't removed it. We just moved it. So you can select it there. And as I said, you can do the indenting as well. Yeah, you can review those settings and see what you want. And you'll note that with the new First Start Wizard, it'll actually start a tutorial when you finish. So if you select that and finish the tutorial, or finish the First Start Wizard, it'll open the tutorial and get you started understanding what's going on in Komodo. Something to note about this dialog is that it's completely written from our new UI SDK, which allows you to build UI elements and build anything you want to see in Komodo using just a really easy-to-use SDK. So next up is Gulp, Grunt, and NPM integration. So on the left-hand side of Nathan's screen, you can see these dynamic buttons, and this is what I was talking about, where it shows you what you need when you need it. So Nathan's project is, it's a node project, so it shows you an NPM button. It has Gulp tasks installed, so you get the tasks, as well as, is this a Grunt project? No, it's the, so it has Phonegap? No, that's Cordova.
Yes, it's Cordova.
Yeah. So it has a Cordova, it's also a Cordova project, so it has, and he has just the Android libraries installed for his application, so it only shows those commands. If he had the iOS stuff installed as well, he would have those commands as well. So it's very contextual, shows you only what you need, or only what is available, and so it's very, very cool. The symbol browser is now project-wide. It has always been there, but it was file-specific. Now you can get it, and it searches your entire project, and you can search any symbol in your entire project, which is just awesome. And the new version control UX. So Nathan will show you this. Actually, Nathan, you do this one, because you did this and you know this well.
All right. So this is probably the biggest change to the version controls. You now have this widget at the bottom where you can commit your changes. So I can select what files I want. I can do this with my keyboard. It's new into 10.1. I can write my message. I can access recent messages. I can open a dialog here, and then I can obviously just commit it. And then similarly, we have the project history here. so I can see what changes have been made to my project. And I have the file history, which just showed the current file. So if I switch to another file, it should update. There we go. And another big change is the dynamic button here, which gives you quick access to all your version control tasks. And this works on the, like I was saying, this works on a project, not necessarily on the file itself. So right now, if this file I had open was, then this button would work on a repository for this file rather than places. That was the change in 10.10. And you can also, you have your project-wide actions, these, and then you also have your file-specific actions, which is these. All right, let's have a look at the 10.1 features now. So you might have been figuring, why isn't he pressing finish when we were looking at the first start wizard? Well, I didn't want to rush ahead of this, but I'm of course going to show you the tutorial. So this is the tutorial that you'll see when you first start using Komodo. It basically just guides you through the basics of Komodo. What I want to kind of explain to you is not necessarily the tutorial itself, but kind of what you can do with it. So as you can see right now, it opened on the left side of my screen, but I can configure it, the tutorial itself, right here, to be undocked instead of docked in Komodo, or I can configure it to be at the bottom of my screen instead of at the side of my screen. I can do callouts with it. Oh. A little Chrome bug there, I think. I can do callouts with it, which would call out specific elements. I can get tips. So if someone gets stuck with it, I can, if I move on to a step that requires validation, so this step, changing preferences, if I find it here, creating a project, changing preferences. So you can see this is the actual tutorial that was written. If I press next here, it's going to do the validation step. Validate prefs if closed. So if I go to logic, and I can actually look at that. Validate prefs closed, or open is that, I think. It will actually validate this. So if I press next, it will say you need to open the preferences window. You need to open the preferences window. So yeah, that's kind of the tutorial at its most basic. It allows you don't even have to write this whole logic. This is all completely optional. I can start a new tutorial and it will pre-fill the basic requirements. A lot of it here, this is just comments to kind of help you along. I can start a new tutorial, press OK. I'll give this a different name because you can see I already have some here. I haven't customized anything other than the name, and then I basically already have a running example that I can start working from.
Yeah, it's really well documented in there. That's how I was writing all the new tutorials.
Yeah, and if that isn't enough, the example, you can go to docs.komodoid.com, and there's a whole section dedicated to the new tutorial tool.
Mm-hmm.
So another big change in Komodo 10.1 is, as Carey was explaining earlier, the publishing tool has some enhancements. So, for example, if I use the dynamic toolbar button here, there are now push file and pull file options. I should probably have a file open that's actually published. So I can force push a file or force pull a file, which is very useful when you're just working locally and you just want your changes to be available remotely. For those who don't really use the publishing tool, maybe the name publishing isn't the best name for the tool, because what it's actually doing is it's syncing. It's synchronizing your file. So any file that changed remotely and hasn't changed locally would be pulled in. Any file that changed locally and hasn't changed remotely would be pushed. And if there's conflicts, Komodo would show you those conflicts and let you resolve them. So this kind of lets you sidestep that and just say like, okay, no, I know exactly what I'm doing. Don't mind any conflicts. Just push my file, or just pull my file. That's what this does. Additionally, when I go to the dialog, you will now have a force push all and force pull all, which you could essentially do before, but what you would have to do is you would have to, once this list is done loading, which depends entirely on the remote server connection and how many files you're doing. Here, this is a good example. There's conflicts. So what you would have to do before is you would have to select those and then resolve conflict, upload local file. Whereas what you can just do now is just say, okay, I just want to force push everything. I don't care about conflicts, just push everything.
Yeah.
All right, global font settings. So as Carey was saying, this allows you to change your font settings in a global manner. So before you would be using the color scheme editor. So if someone just installed Komodo and they don't like the font size or the font family that was used, they would have to start editing their actual color scheme in order to change that, which is not very user-friendly. So now, and I'll show this again, if I go to Preferences and Appearance, there's a new font section. FYI, the scroll bar here is the wrong color. That's because I just changed the theme. Changing theme almost always goes flawless, but there are sometimes some issues like this run right here, and they're easily resolved by just restarting Komodo.
I kind of like that scroll bar. It's nice.
So as you can see, I can basically set it, as it is set by default, to just let the color scheme decide what font and font size to use, or I can optionally uncheck this and just define my own values. So I can make the fonts bigger, smaller, I can change the font face. For the editor, I have the same options with the addition of also line spacing. And when I set those will be used regardless of what color scheme I'm using. Alright, the branch switching widgets. Let's have a look at that. So as you can see here in the bottom of my status bar, you can see the version control icon with the name of my branch. If I select this, and it's probably going to not work right now. No. I thought it wasn't going to work because I thought I had modified some files that would conflict, but it seems I didn't. So it allows me to just switch to a different branch and switch back. That's really all it is, but it's something that if you're using Git or Mercurial, you're probably doing a lot, because branching in those version control systems is very, very powerful and very useful.
Something to note is that if you were in the default scheme, that'll be at the top of the file.
Yeah, good point, because I mean, when Carey was explaining the classic scheme, I did select place status bar below editor, whereas by default it's over here. Good point. The find results are now in their can now be in their own file tab. So if you go to Preferences and then Find, you can here select Open File Results as file tabs. By default, this is unchecked, so you would have to check this if you want to do this. And then if I do a find, so I'll do Control Shift F, I'm going to search for tab, find L. Now it opens. There we go again. See? Should ideally restart Komodo right now. So then it gives you your find results in a file tab, rather than the old way of this, or the default way of this working is it would open a little file tab here, which I'm almost fairly low resolution right now, but if you're working on low resolution, that can be very bothersome because it gets a little bit full up here because you always have these open. And then finally, the thing I'm going to show you is the color scheme editor improvements. I should really have had an older version of Komodo running here so I can show you a side by side, but I'll explain. Basically, what it was doing before is these little previews that you see right here. The entire line was colored this way, and you didn't have this icon. So if there were lines like this one, where you can barely read it, you could barely read what the line said. So this has been improved, so you now have these little icons indicating the colors that you have set. Additionally, the actual values that you see here are now user-friendly. They're user-friendly labels rather than being the actual programming values that we use, the variable names, which can be a little bit confusing. All right, so let's go back to our slides because we are done with the demo now. Carey?
Yep. So we're gonna do another poll. How do you, if we might be springing this on you kind of quick because you just found out about the tutorial tool, but you're probably also very excited about it. So how do you imagine yourself using it? Let it plug in your answers now. I know we're using it. We're using it to explain how to use Komodo. And we're going to be writing more tutorials as we go. Yeah. So go ahead and plug those answers in, and learning languages, learn to use
That's
Komodo.
not surprising.
Don't tend to use it. Those people are confident.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's really the tool is really targeted at three things essentially. One, teaching you how to use Komodo. Two, it's targeted at teachers to use with their students. And three, it's targeted at junior developers, which we do have junior developers using Komodo, but as we've found, the majority of Komodo users are senior developers. So it's not too surprising that we don't that a lot of you don't intend to use or only intend to use it for Komodo tutorials.
Mm.
But it's interesting to see that frameworks is more popular than languages.
And to just a reminder, I said I was going to do this. There's a sale going on for single license and the 5-pack. Use those super secret codes to get the deal when you're buying the license, and it stands for Back to Work, the BTW. I had to ask, because I'm not that creative. So use those when you're buying your license, and you can get yourself a flashy new deal. And don't forget that we're doing a survey. This will be in the email that we send out afterwards, so you can participate in the survey, give feedback on Komodo. I should mention, I think I mentioned it later, but you can always give us feedback. We're always listening. Twitter, the forums, or our GitHub account. If you have enhancement requests, send them over. We want them, and if we can do them, we do them. And yeah, let us know. Tweet at us or in the forums. Let us know what you want to see in these webinars. If we're missing anything, or if you want to hear me tell more jokes or something, then let us know.
All right, let's move on to Q&A. I'll leave the last slide open here so you can just reference that because you don't really need to see Q&A. Question 1, I had a lot of trouble with the default colors, especially the find highlighting. It was hard to figure out exactly which items to change in the theme editors to make things visible.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, hopefully you'll enjoy 10.1.0 then, because this should make it a lot easier for you.
Nathan, why don't you quickly do that?
All right, so let's have a quick look. Color scheme editor, because we want to change the find highlighting. All right, so I mean, I happen to know where this is, so I can show you right away, but obviously what you would do as a user is you would just select your color scheme, you'd be in the editor, and you'd be browsing through this trying to find what's relevant to this. In this case, we're looking for find highlight right here. I don't know what this was called before. I'm pretty sure it was not called find highlight, though, so I'm not surprised that you had trouble finding it.
It was something, but yeah.
It should be a lot easier now.
Yeah. So there you can set you can set the different types of indicators. You can set the color, the opacity, and then you can do a box, you can do an underline, you can do an outline or a highlighting. You can do whatever you want. I do a bright red box so that it is super duper obvious what is being highlighted or being shown to me.
Yep.
Question 2, while Nathan's setting that, is there a reason that the key bindings are not consistent across all platforms? Yes. Have you ever used I'm assuming this person did use all 3 platforms. All 3 platforms have all different OS-related key bindings, as well as key bindings that simply do not work. It's impossible to have consistent. Well, I guess maybe I should never say impossible, but it's insanely difficult to have consistent, to have the same key binding set across all platforms. For example,
FYI.
go
Sorry.
ahead.
No, finish. I'll just.
A classic example is that if you're going to do something on Windows and Linux, it's Control C to copy. On OS X, it's Command, but they still have the Control button. So that's one example why we would not use Control.
And it's not just that. It's also that some keys just outright don't work on some platforms. Like you had a bug that Carey just fixed where you were using Control and larger than, I believe, on Linux, whereas on Windows this wouldn't work. It just outright doesn't work. So you'd have to use Control Shift larger than. Like there's issues like that. But something worth pointing out what I used to do, because I'm used to Windows or Linux key bindings, which are very similar. And then I'd be working on Mac OS, which is just, for me, was a pain in the ass because the key bindings are so different. What I would just do in those cases is I'd copy over my key binding scheme from a Windows or Linux computer onto a Mac computer, which, it would still have issues because there are those issues that we just raised, but overall I could do Control C instead of Command C. And what I've actually gotten around to doing these days is I just use a third-party application that lets me redefine key bindings altogether, so I can basically use my Windows or Linux key bindings or Mac.
Should clicking on the icon for the dynamic button open the menu, or just clicking the arrow?
Yeah, that's intended. So most buttons have two actions. So for example, I think version control, if you just click on the button, it's supposed to open a commit dialog. That's just a quick way of getting to your most used action for that button. Whereas if you click the arrow, it gives you all the other contextual actions. It's by design.
This next question is, it's almost like a seed question. This is great. How do you add gulp to Komodo? Oh wait, there is a preference that you have to set, right?
Not necessarily. If you have gulp installed on your system and it's on your path, Komodo will automatically detect that you have gulp installed. But the way that the button works in Komodo, and this goes for almost all dynamic sidebar buttons, is they detect on whether you're using it. If you have a gulp file in your project with task registered, and Komodo can run that. So if you go into, that's a good way to test it in the command output pane. You can actually run like gulp test or something. If that command runs, so Komodo is able to interact with it, then Komodo will detect that you have task registered and show the button. If it's not showing, then it means that either you don't have a gulp file in the root of your repository or your project, or Komodo is not able to interact with gulp, maybe because of environment variables or what have you.
Yeah, so that would be gulp should either be on your path and Komodo would find it, or you can set it in preferences. Is it?
It's under Node.js.
Node.js, yeah. Next question is, can all 10.1 projects be opened and edited with earlier versions, e.g. Komodo 8? Yes.
10.1 projects be opened and edited with... Oh, yeah. I don't think the project format has changed at all since version 7, I want to say. So yeah, it should be fine.
Yep. Will you
more tutorials?
Toads.
Yeah. Yes, I've actually been working on one, and even Carey doesn't know about this one because it's just one of those things where I feel like working on this. I've been working on a getting started with PHP tutorial, which basically just runs you to setting up PHP and Apache on your platform, and then configuring it in Komodo, and then having your first hello world and debugging it. Like, it goes through the whole flow of how you would get started with PHP in Komodo. But yeah, like that, there will be a lot more tutorials. We definitely intend to utilize this tool. If this doesn't end up being used by a community to write tutorials for other community members, which we very much hope it will, but if it doesn't, it's still not a loss for us, because we can use the tool ourselves to teach you about Komodo.
Is there a way to see file or directory history? I guess that'd be from the OS file system.
I think, if you modify a file, seeing a past version of it or something.
Yes,
I mean, that's what we control it would be more.
Nav is nodding, and that is the right context. So
yeah, so that's what you would use version control for. But Komodo does not itself provide this functionality. It's something that you would have to use version control for.
Yeah. Something to note is that Komodo has track changes, which shows you the changes that have occurred in the file, but it doesn't show you history of changes.
No.
It doesn't show you history of, like, it's not different versions of the file. It's comparing against either the last dirty state or last clean state of the dirty file, or differences from the last commit.
Yeah. How can I share my color schemes? This is actually really simple. Let me go to my browser. If you go to KomodoIDE.com, and then I think it's Community Contribute, you can select here, how do I contribute? So this would be a package. I should probably add color scheme there so it's easier to find. So you want to contribute a package. It basically explains right here how to do it. Essentially what you're doing is you're creating a GitHub repository, which is very simple. You're adding your file to it, and then you're adding a reference to that file in our package repository. This used to be like a little sleek little UI where you just upload a file, but there were a lot of issues with that system. And at the end of the day, we felt like we're working with programmers. Programmers like to work with code, so why don't we make this that same type of workflow?
Everybody can use practice writing pull requests, so why not? This next question sounds more like an enhancement request. I know there's a publishing tool, but it would be nice to drag and drop to a server to upload files, a new plugin, new framework, or whatever you're adding. Otherwise, FTP applications would have to be opened up for each of the servers, at least for smaller sites. I
think we have an enhancement request open for this drag and drop support for remote files.
Yeah, that sounds really familiar.
It's important to remember that at the end of the day, we're not trying to be an FTP application. We're trying to facilitate you to work with certain server protocols from the context of Komodo. We're not going to be facilitating complex FTP actions or anything like that.
Mm. And last question, what do the performance enhancements in the release notes mean?
So, there were a couple smaller ones, but the biggest one there is if you were using version control and you made a change, like you committed a file or something, all of the widgets, the version control widgets in your bottom pane would reload and get the new state, which could slow down Komodo. And the way it works now is a widget will only reload if it's visible. So if it's not visible at all, it doesn't cost any performance other than maybe a little bit of memory usage. So that should make a big difference to people that use version control.
I don't remember all the performance enhancements that we made, but there was quite a few in 10.1, wasn't there? Or no, there was more in 10.
Yeah, 10 had a lot of them, and then 10.1 had a little bit more, but not to the degree of 10.0.
So it looks like we're out of questions, and we're almost using the full time, and you guys, everybody probably needs to get back to work, so we won't take any more of your time. So to get a hold of us, use those things. Nope, don't use it. Well, whatever, you can use those things. But to get a hold of the Komodo peoples, you can use @Komodo IDE, or come to our forums, which is at komodoide.com/forum.
Nope.
Oh, it's not. Forum.komodoide.com, sorry. If you need to file enhancement or bug reports, they go to our GitHub edit account. I know Komodo Edit, it's different, but it's our open source version of Komodo IDE, so you can get into, so that's where we track our public issues. And you can get a hold of us directly by using our Twitter handles. And I think that's it. So everybody have a great day, and I hope it's sunny where you are. It's pretty nice here.
Raining here. All right.
Bye, everybody.
Have a nice day.